I think the world has ever seen. Whenever necessary, we've absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the
Could
core
you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well,
Keir Starmer thought he was in control, but then Donald Trump stepped in, and things got messy. A routine press conference turned into a political showdown, with Trump exposing Starmer's contradictions and pushing him into a very uncomfortable corner. Did Starmer hold his ground, or did Trump leave him scrambling for answers? Donald Trump wasted no time in taking aim at Keir Starmer's stance on free speech, turning what could have been a routine press conference into a heated exchange. With his signature bluntness, Trump pointed to recent cases in the UK where individuals were arrested over social media posts, actions that many see as direct violations of free expression. He emphasised how such policies don't just impact British citizens, but also American technology companies that operate under entirely different legal standards. The contrast was stark. In the United States, free speech is protected under the First Amendment, whereas in the UK, increasing restrictions on online content have led to growing concerns about censorship.
in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time.
Starmer, known for his measured and diplomatic tone, attempted to brush off Trump's concerns, insisting that Britain remains a strong defender of free speech. But his response lacked the conviction needed to counter Trump's aggressive rhetoric. As Trump continued pressing the issue, it became clear that Starmer was struggling to justify the UK's approach to online regulations. His deflections did little to ease skepticism, particularly from American politicians like J.D. Vance, who had also raised concerns about Britain's tightening grip on online discourse. For Trump and his supporters, this exchange only reinforced the belief that Starmer was unwilling to confront.
It's good to know that the United Kingdom has a true friend in the Oval Office, and it was so good to see the bust of Winston Churchill back in its rightful place just a moment ago.
Keir Starmer's attempt to align himself with Winston Churchill's legacy during the press conference was anything but smooth. Knowing Donald Trump's deep admiration for Churchill, Starmer made a point to praise the former British Prime Minister, emphasising his leadership and resilience. On the surface, it seemed like a smart political move, an attempt to position himself as a leader in the same vein as one of Britain's most revered figures. However, this sudden admiration didn't sit well with many observers, particularly those who remembered Starmer's previous criticisms of Churchill's colonial legacy.
There was a special relationship with Churchill, and Starmer has just removed all of Winston Churchill's portraits from the Houses of Parliament. Go figure.
Just a few days ago, Starmer had publicly called for a more nuanced view of Churchill's past, a stance that had sparked debates about historical revisionism. Now, with Trump in the room, he had reversed course, portraying Churchill as a symbol of strength and patriotism. The shift was too blatant to ignore. Was this a genuine change of heart, or just another calculated attempt to win favour with a foreign leader? For Trump, who has built his political brand on calling out perceived hypocrisy, the move likely seemed insincere. Instead of strengthening Starmer's image, the contradiction raised more doubts about whether he had any firm convictions or was simply willing to reshape his beliefs depending on the audience.
Very importantly, I was just notified by letter from King Charles that he's extended through the Prime Minister a historic second state.
One of the most surprising moments of the press conference was the revelation that Keir Starmer had extended a formal invitation to Donald Trump on behalf of King Charles. While such diplomatic gestures are common, this particular invitation sparked intense debate. To Starmer's critics, it wasn't just a routine act of diplomacy. It was a strategic move designed to reposition himself on the global stage. By inviting Trump for a second state visit, Starmer appeared to be courting favour with a leader he had previously distanced himself from. For many, the invitation felt like a drastic shift in tone. Just a few years ago, Starmer had been openly critical of Trump, even suggesting he wouldn't engage with him on friendly terms. Now, with an official invitation backed by the monarchy, he seemed eager to smooth over past tensions. This left many questioning his true motivations. Was this a genuine attempt to strengthen UK-US relations, or was it a calculated effort to appear more statesmanlike? Trump himself, always quick to spot political maneuvering, likely saw through the gesture. Rather than viewing it as a sincere extension of goodwill, he may have perceived it as yet another example of Starmer trying to play both sides, a leader willing to shift positions whenever it suited him.
In his remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK. Particularly, could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on.
The tension in the room escalated when US Senator J.D. Vance directly challenged Keir Starmer on the UK's growing restrictions on free speech. Vance, a staunch advocate for free expression, wasted no time in pointing out the rising number of arrests linked to social media posts in Britain. He argued that laws like the UK's Online Safety Bill were not just about regulating harmful content, but actively stifling political discourse. Starmer, clearly uncomfortable, tried to downplay the concerns, insisting that free speech was still protected under British law.
Also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British.
However, Vance didn't back down. He emphasised the stark contrast between the UK and the US, where the First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech without government interference. Starmer's vague reassurances rang hollow in this context. His reluctance to directly address the concerns only fueled criticism that he was sidestepping an issue that Trump and many conservatives view as fundamental. The exchange underscored a broader divide between the two nations' approach to free expression, leaving Starmer struggling to defend Britain's increasingly controversial policies. Donald Trump didn't hold back when it came to his assessment of Keir Starmer's leadership. As the press conference unfolded, Trump seized the opportunity to call out what he saw as Starmer's political inconsistencies. From free speech to his stance on Churchill, Trump painted Starmer as a leader who changed positions to fit the moment, rather than standing by firm principles. For someone like Trump, who thrives on direct confrontation, this was the perfect moment to expose what he considered Starmer's weakness, a lack of authenticity.
This relationship matters more than ever. We remain each other's first partner in defence, ready to come to the other's aid, to counter threats wherever and whenever they may arise.
Starmer, in contrast, stuck to his usual polished and careful rhetoric, trying to present himself as a steady and pragmatic leader. But in the face of Trump's blunt delivery, his approach seemed overly cautious, even weak. Every time Starmer tried to frame himself as a strong and capable statesman, Trump was quick to undercut him with pointed remarks and dismissive comments. For Trump's supporters, this only reinforced their belief that traditional politicians like Starmer were more interested in optics than actual leadership. Meanwhile, Starmer's struggle to push back effectively against Trump's attacks left many questioning whether he had the ability to stand firm in high-pressure political encounters.
But we're going to be discussing many things today. We'll be discussing Russia-Ukraine. We'll be discussing trade.
While words were exchanged throughout the press conference, the unspoken battle between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump played out just as clearly in their body language. Trump, as always, exuded confidence, legs apart, shoulders squared, and a relaxed yet dominant presence that signaled control of the room. Starmer, on the other hand, appeared noticeably more reserved. Sitting with his legs crossed and leaning slightly forward, he seemed to be trying to maintain composure, but analysts quickly noted that his posture conveyed nervousness rather than authority.
We have met a number of times, we've talked a number of times, and we have had a very constructive conversation. I'm sure we will today. And of course, our countries have been bound together for a very long time now.
Observers pointed out that Starmer's gestures and expressions often seemed calculated, as if he had been coached on how to handle the interaction. At times, he attempted to mirror Trump's assertiveness by leaning in or making deliberate hand gestures. But the effort came across as unnatural. Meanwhile, Trump's demeanor remained effortlessly commanding, further reinforcing the power dynamic at play. Political commentators later debated whether Starmer's cautious body language reflected his true discomfort or was simply a result of the pressure of going toe-to-toe with someone as unpredictable as Trump. Either way, the contrast between the two leaders' physical presence only added to the perception that Starmer was struggling to hold his ground.
So this is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special.
Keir Starmer's evolving stance on Donald Trump has raised eyebrows, particularly among those who remember his past criticisms of the former US president. Not long ago, Starmer made it clear that he had no interest in engaging with Trump on friendly terms, dismissing him as a divisive figure. Yet, in a stunning reversal, he not only welcomed Trump, but facilitated an official invitation for a second state visit. This dramatic shift left many wondering, was this a genuine change in perspective, or simply a calculated political move? Critics argue that Starmer's sudden embrace of Trump is nothing more than an attempt to broaden his appeal and appear more diplomatic on the international stage. His supporters, however, insist that engaging with Trump is necessary for maintaining strong UK-US relations. Regardless of the motivation, the inconsistency is hard to ignore. Trump, never one to overlook political opportunism, likely saw through the act. Rather than viewing Starmer's invitation as a sincere gesture, he may have recognized it as yet another example of a politician adjusting his stance to suit the moment. The question remains, will Starmer's attempt at pragmatism strengthen his leadership image, or will it further damage his credibility?
So can the Prime Minister tell the House, does he still believe that President Trump is a reliable ally?
Keir Starmer's high-profile exchange with Donald Trump could have lasting consequences for his leadership and the Labour Party's future. While some saw his diplomatic approach as a sign of political maturity, others viewed it as a display of inconsistency and weakness. His shifting stance on key issues, such as free speech, Churchill, and his sudden willingness to engage with Trump, left many questioning whether he is a principled leader or a politician who adapts his message based on the audience in front of him.
With the Prime Minister, and there's all talk this morning about spending cuts and the upcoming...
For voters who value consistency and authenticity, Starmer's approach may come across as opportunistic rather than strategic. His attempts to balance diplomacy with political positioning risk alienating both his core supporters and those he hopes to win over. Meanwhile, Trump's ability to expose these contradictions only reinforced the perception that Starmer is struggling to define himself on the global stage. As the UK moves toward its next election, this moment could play a key role in shaping Starmer's public image. If he cannot convincingly stand by his positions, he may find it difficult to maintain credibility, both at home and abroad.
You mentioned Canada. I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist. We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't discuss Canada.
Thank you. Please.
Donald Trump has built his reputation on calling out what he sees as political gamesmanship, and his encounter with Keir Starmer was no exception. Throughout the press conference, Trump wasted no time highlighting Starmer's inconsistencies and even cut him off at one point. Unlike traditional politicians who carefully craft their public image, Trump thrives on being unpredictable and direct. This put Starmer in an uncomfortable position, as his calculated responses were met with Trump's sharp, unfiltered counterpoints. For Trump's supporters, this moment reinforced their belief that he is the ultimate disruptor, someone who isn't afraid to challenge political figures and expose what he perceives as hypocrisy. Starmer, on the other hand, struggled to maintain control of the narrative, often appearing defensive rather than confident. This further fueled criticism that he was playing both sides, trying to appeal to different audiences without taking a firm stance. In the end, Trump's ability to cut through political maneuvering left Starmer looking more like a cautious bureaucrat than a decisive leader, raising doubts about how he would handle future high-pressure political confrontations. Keir Starmer's face-off with Donald Trump may have been meant as a diplomatic moment, but it quickly turned into a test of leadership. While he tried to stay composed, Trump's blunt approach put him on the defensive, exposing contradictions in his stance on free speech, Churchill, and even his sudden outreach to Trump himself. Instead of appearing strong and confident, Starmer seemed cautious and calculated, raising doubts about his ability to handle high-pressure situations. With elections approaching, this encounter could define his leadership. Will it prove him to be a steady statesman or expose him as a leader who bends with the political wind? So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments down below.